Just to ask you, could you introduce the audience a little bit to the world of the book? Where is it set? That country is not at all like ours, not at all. Absolutely not. And could you tell us a little something about General Firebrand himself? Who's, if you could hand me the book, yeah. Thank you. Yeah. So General Firebrand and his Red Atlas, and just introduce us to them a little bit.
So, see, this book came out, any writer is a product of the time, and so am I. So there will be certain connections which readers will obviously make with certain characters in real world, but it's completely up to them to make that. It's not intentional on my part in the first place. Also, this book came to me like in a flood. And this book was written in, I think, about 2 months flat. And I wrote it in a flow, and I had not structured it or something like that. I wrote it in a flow. It's from beginning to the end. And I had an idea of how I wanted to end the book, but a large part of the middle parts I had to fill up on the way. And this character of Firebrand is inspired by people I have met in real life. Some people. Some of his traits are also made up completely. And because if you're a journalist, and you come across various kinds of people in the world, and I've been extensively doing rural reporting at one point of time. I used to travel across the length and breadth of, especially the eastern part of the country, and I've met very interesting characters, and all of them kind of probably came together. A lot of these characters came together, and obviously there are certain traits I made because I wanted the character to be like that. I just didn't want him to be a perfect character. I wanted him to be
he was a revolutionary, he was a fighting man, but he's no perfect hero.
Yeah.
His family life is messy, he's got vulnerabilities.
Yeah, and in a way, when I wrote this novel, it's a bit personal for me as well, because I was going through a troubled time myself, and I had lost both my parents and my grandmother in very quick succession and stuff. And for the first time, I think I became very insecure and very afraid at the back of my head, and I've always been a very confident sort of a guy, and at that point of time I had no confidence and in anything. I've been driving ever since. I was very young when I learned to drive, and I'm a fairly good driver and very confident driver. And also, those days I used to sit and even think about taking the car out of the parking lot. I was a wreck.
Because it was grief upon grief upon grief.
Yeah.
Yes?
And
so it was a series of losses.
So this novel came as a savior, I think, to me. Because once I finished this novel, I realized I had peace. And I had a sense of closure. And I also realized while writing this novel that personally I had not reconciled with a lot of things which have happened in my life. But I needed to reconcile with them at the same time. And so this novel became a vent, became a way of reconciliation in my mind. And
it was more than that as well. It reaches out to other people. It says something to readers who are living through a particular time, even though it's set in a, as we said, completely fictional country. I want to take you back just a little bit to your home, and to what it meant. Your father, Nabarun Bhattacharya, was he was an extremely sharp, astringent, and beloved Bengali writer whose range went from poetry to novels to satire himself. Your grandmother was Mahasweta Devi. who really is one of India's greatest writers. And Bijon Bhattacharya as well. You grew up with writing around you. And yet you made your life as a reader, but outside writing. What did you know then about the power of writing? What are the memories that come back to you? Your father's desk?
My father's, let me first start this with my father's writing desk. My father's writing desk was a big wooden desk like this with a glass top. So beneath the glass top, he used to have about 12 to 14 photographs. And these photographs were of Soviet war correspondents who took those pictures while they were liberating the concentration camps in Eastern Europe one by one. They were extremely gaudy and gory photographs. I mean, and since my father used to work with the Soviet information services, he had access to these things. And I had once asked him that, why do you keep this photograph under your writing? I was very young those days. So my father said that so that I never forget what I am writing about. Yes. There are things the world should not forget. And while I used to work abroad, and during my travels abroad, I have traveled to all these places and stuff. And I mean, I think, in a way, also, if you see, I mean, the book has a lot of conflict, a lot of fighting, a lot of things, because actually the real world is shaped by wars, which we don't realize. I mean, today's world is shaped by the two world wars. Right now, you have so many wars going on in every part of the world, and we don't realize something that wars don't just shape geopolitics; they shape science. From your penicillin to your World Wide Web, everything has come out of defense, and it is a reality which is going to stay.
I think that was one of the most amazing things about General Firebrand for me, that, you go into things like special economic zones and to the profit model behind bombs, but at the same time, it races along. And some of it, I wanted to ask you about what you were reading when you grew up, because I think we, both remember Calcutta at a certain time when three different strands come together. Your father's own characters, Bon Biral, Begum Johnson, etc. They are so loved, and you give them a new life here, which I really want you to talk about, but also about Russian literature, because so many ghosts come back, including, by the way, Russian women snipers, who are among my favorite type of sniper.
So let me first begin with why I used my father's characters. See, my father, towards the end of his life, I mean, he fell really badly sick, and he could not finish his last novel. So, and the Bengali publishing house, I mean, which published the novel, actually left 20 blank pages towards the end of the book for the readers to finish the book themselves. And I thought I would give those characters a sense of closure, because I saw that it actually pained him a lot that he couldn't finish the book. And I saw that in his eyes. And so I thought I'll give them a fitting farewell. And about the Russian characters, and see, my close friends know, I'm a known Russophile. I mean, when it comes to literature, when it comes to music, when it comes to cinema, when it comes to art, landscape art, and I'm a big time Russophile. I mean, like, and I've studied military history in details. So, all these generals I talk about, I've actually read their memoirs, all of them. And many of them are multi-volume memoirs, and like that of Zhukov and Rokossovsky, and also Bagramian. I mean, so it was an amalgamation of all these things which came into and I mean, like, ever since I was small, I mean, I had an interest in military history. So if you go to my Calcutta house, I have two almirahs almost full of books on just military history, and those are collected over a period of time. And And during my journalistic days also, there was a brief time when I did defense beat. And so that also helped in a way to understand things about maneuver warfare and stuff like that. So I think all of them coalesce together to form the book and the characters. And when I was small, I mean, we were surrounded by books. So you would get books for, every occasion. If it was a birthday, you would get only books. For Pujo also, along with the clothes, you will get books.
Yes.
On the Bengali New Year's, you will get books. On New Year's, you will get books. I mean, people gifted each other books. Birthdays meant you only got books as gift. I mean, there were no other gifts. I mean, and so you grew up with books. And I was very privileged that since my father had a very varied taste, I mean, so I grew up reading a lot of very different kind of literature. For example, I don't know how many of my contemporary writers would have read Dhan Gopal Mukherjee, who ironically is probably the first successful Indian writer abroad. In 1917, I think Kori the Elephant was published.
And he was an extraordinary man, right? A revolutionary who had to flee.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, he was a remarkable man. He is the one who gave M.N. Roy his name, Manovendra Nath Roy. Afterwards, Manovendra Nath Roy would go on to found the communist parties of both India and Mexico. I mean, and his own, and so this is just, for example, I was very lucky that I grew up reading the classics of Bengali literature as well.
You know, I now have this image of you building a book out of a house of books, almost, practically.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, we grew up reading Troilok Konath, Michael Madhusudan Dotto, then Bibhuti Bhushan Bandyopadhyay, Advaita Mallavarman, amazing writers. I mean, Advaita Mallavarman, only one novel, but you need not write anymore. If you have written a novel like that, I mean, that's pretty much enough. I mean, and also internationally, the writers I admire as I grew up.
See that.
For example, I love Manuel Puig.
Yeah. And there's a lot of that, strain of fantasy that's actually built on a very recognizable reality.
Yeah.
So Tathagata, can you get to the country that we find ourselves in General Firebrand? It's run by a Madam President who appears to be sane, but is she really? And it's racked by war. And what happens, I don't want to give away too much, but you actually have birds and beasts coming in quite naturally and starting to fight on the side of humans.
Yeah, I mean,
what are they fighting for?
Well, I mean, I guess they're fighting for survival. And they're fighting for their right to exist. I think the imaginary land that I've built, they're fighting because somebody who is crazy enough, and power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. So I mean, so who is crazy enough to kind of uproot the entire population and decides that I'll turn all of your land into a special economic zone, and so it has to be redesigned. Everything has to be built anew, afresh, and stuff. So you will fight for survival. So that's the spirit I wanted to capture.
Can you just expand on this for a second? When you're talking about special economic zones or development in the novel.
Also, I'm saying also there is a non-anthropocentric thing in that thing. Because, in this, our development model in today's world, the capitalist development model is very anthropocentric. We think that that humans have a primacy over everything, that other species probably don't have a right to exist. So we can encroach upon forests, we can take over here, we can turn it into an industrial zone, we can build an airport, we can dig mines wherever we want, we can build dams wherever we want. It doesn't matter whether it affects other life forms, as if they don't have a right to exist on the earth. I mean, which I find is absurd. I mean, who gave man the God-given right to determine the fate of the earth?
And you kind of see us as one species among many?
Yes.
Can you just take us a little bit to your work in Uttarakhand? Okay. What did you see out there 25 years ago? It was a fragile region. You're talking about the Himalayas, some of the newest mountains in the world. Vast forests. Rivers. This was before the sand mining started. What did you start to see? when you saw that deterioration, did you just witness it or did you feel it deep inside? And
Yes, I felt it because I've been going to the Himalayas ever since I was very small. So I mean, like, and now I've built a place, small house and a farm and stuff. But the thing is that I've been going to the mountains ever since I was very small. I mean, I love mountains, and I've seen this change, this unbridled development, unplanned, without any consideration to soil type, whether any consideration to topography, to water tables. Everything has changed in the mountains now. Mountains are more or less water deficient everywhere. I mean, all over Uttarakhand, and and obviously you have seen what has happened in the Garhwal region. I mean, like with the the Joshimath thing,
with the
and
landslides.
landslides, and there are cracks developing inside there, because I mean it's crazy. I mean, like the kind of development, these places are not supposed to have roads that wide. They're not supposed to have helipads at those elevations. I mean, like there was a reason why people would trek, and people would go like that. And now everything is being made easy for the paying tourist. So if you can pay, you fly. You take a helicopter, but you don't really understand what you're doing to that zone, to that. And the point is that even after repeated floods, earthquakes,
You're not learning.
There are no lessons.
Yeah. But I have a question now. You're so eloquent about this when you speak, and you could easily write non-fiction articles about this. What is it that made you turn to fiction? Yes, in the aftermath of grief, there was something about this that brought back peace, sanity, stability, just the act of writing a novel, just the act of creating. That's powerful. But why did you want to write this story of the earth as well as was in fiction? What did that give you?
I'll tell you very frankly, I mean, like, I guess my father knew that I would write at one point of time, and he always used to egg me on and said that you write. It's high time you now start writing. And, I had this thing in the back of my head, father is around, so I don't need to write right now. So I think this entire thing came that, okay, now he's no longer there. And that generation is no longer there. So maybe this is the time that I should. And also, at that point of time, my mental state, it kind of drove me into a frenzy while writing. Because I understood that if I didn't write this book, I might end up doing something drastic to myself. And I was very scared about that. And I knew that I had to write this book because I knew that this was going to save me. That this was the only cure. And later on, I had to seek professional help too, and the therapist told me that I was going through an acute bout of grief. I couldn't handle grief because towards the first few months, I tried to act very cool and stuff, and it all sunk in after 2 months when things started going wrong. And so, in a way, there was that drive, a very personal, it was a matter of survival.
Tathagata, I'm so glad that you shared this, because so often the way that we're encouraged to present the story of us becoming writers is that we went from strength to strength, or it's about success. And Tathagata, for so many of us, it begins with vulnerability.
Absolutely. For me, it was, this book is, I have been telling one of my friends that this book is born out of acute fear and nothing else. Fear.
Why fear?
I was afraid I was losing myself. I was afraid I was going to lose everything around me. I was going to lose my family, the remaining members of my family. I was going to lose whatever, in professional life, whatever I have achieved. I was a complete wreck. I can't describe myself to you. In my professional life, I've always worked, with considerable, goodwill and I know in those 2-3 months, even professionally, what I was doing. Because I was completely, I was nowhere in the zone.
I see that. And you reached for something that was your heritage, maybe a heritage that you hadn't actually opened up before, and you found that it was life-giving. And so often, when we're sitting here as readers, we talk about reading being life-giving. I know that there have been times when books have brought me back, have healed something, have repaired something. But here you're talking about writing as an act of, what would you call it, redemption, reclamation. Do you think you know your territory now?
Yeah, in a way it is true. And there is also a history of this in my family. So when my father wrote his first novel, he was also in a very vulnerable state. And I wrote after his death in a Bengali daily. I mean, they had asked me to write a piece. And I said that I have a feeling, the protagonist in that novel, Harbert, he kills himself. And I said, I have a feeling that Harbert kills himself actually to save my father.
Yes.
Because I knew the kind of condition he was in when he was writing that book. Because I was there. And see, for me, it's a very, writing a book it's a very personal thing. So you get involved emotionally. At times you're angry. At times you're sad, you're crying. At times you're extremely happy, delighted, and at times...
And yet you're writing with such joy as well.
Yeah.
Through all of this. I did want... your Acknowledgements is one of the most remarkable pieces of writing I have read in, about 50 years, 40 years, 50 years of reading. And I just wondered whether I could ask you to read out the acknowledgements, either from here or from the podium, wherever you're comfortable. Just share it with everyone who's here.
The acknowledgement section of any book is usually about gratitude and thankfulness. But should that really be all? I would like to begin my acknowledgements by first acknowledging the power of words. What ought to be the words of a novel like? What color should those words wear? Are the words well fed? Did they have their mothers around them when their fates were being sealed after many days of starvation? Are they sane after being without medicines or electricity for more than 2 months? Many words have been truncated into mangled bits and pieces as the bombs hit them in Gaza. Many words of children were melted to make soap for the German SS officers in Buchenwald and Belsen. Many words have been beheaded, some firebombed. Now, some words are like guerrillas. They are always going to escape. They will go here and there. You cannot gauge their trajectory of travel. But they will always return fire. Some words are dead. They have been buried far and deep inside the forests. Some words have been raped and then burned to ash. Words are crazy. They're cruel. They're unpredictable. In my short life, I have known many such words. These words move me. Words of safety have never interested me. But words are also forever. Manuscripts don't burn, no matter how much fuel you put into the fire. Even words forged in fear today can become the words of someone's courage tomorrow. A small part of my father's poem on Vietnam comes to mind. A false poem can, quote, a false poem can contain more lies than an American president spews out on a routine basis. But a true poem protects children from bombing raids throughout the night, unquote. The translation is mine from Bengali to English. I want to acknowledge that words for me are never going to be a collection of alphabets. They're ingredients of fire and possible arson, hopefully on a large scale, on a very, very large scale, of revolt against injustice, because we have forgotten that the weak and the meek also have a right to exist. as do animals and insects, birds and bees, trees and forests, mountains and rivers.
For 40 years, Tathagata, you resist writing, you refuse to put pen to paper, and then you come out at the end of that with this writing manifesto. I am astonished, and with this novel. And I just want to take you back, we talk often about the purpose of writing, and sometimes that comes from so deep within us. One part of the purpose was absolutely personal, just walking through the fire, finding a way to hold on to life, finding a meaning for that life. But another part of it has to do with, it's so easy to say that we oppose war. Who, except for the politicians, turns around and says war is good? Why is it so? Why has this sunk so deep into your bones? Why do you see fiction as a weapon against armies?
I mean, I think fiction inherently has always had the gall to speak truth to power. And especially in situations where speaking truth to power directly have become difficult. And we are facing such a situation in different parts of the world right now. And it's happening even in the civilized West. And,
civilized?
Yeah. Even in the civilized West, there is an unwritten censorship which has been going on. And you're getting it in terms of media coverage of various regions, various conflicts, in various manners. And there is a narrative. There is a mainstream narrative which is being peddled. And I think in this kind of an atmosphere, I think when alternative voices are being subdued, fiction has the inherent power to kind of show a mirror from time to time.
That is if the writer chooses to do that. I noticed that, do you want to talk about the scarf that you're wearing? I know one of the things that it's in support of. But is it in support of more than that?
Absolutely. Like I read from the EA, see, we actually live in a world where might is right. And from a moral point of view, I'm not talking about religious morality here. I'm talking about basic ethics, humanity and stuff. How can that be true? How can might be right? Because by doing that, you are implicitly saying that if somebody is weak or if somebody is meek, he or she doesn't have a right to exist. You're basically, that can't be the model of a world. That can't be the model of the world. And that's absurd. And that is not sustainable. Today, a lot of powers are finding it unsustainable. For example, like you spoke about the scarf, the ones who are bombing the children and the women there, they are finding it unsustainable. They see the world's reaction. You see an international court of justice being moved. And things have happened, and things are happening. But I think fiction will always throw that light. And there will be some writers who will always speak truth to power, rather than appease those in power.
You avoided writing as long as you could, but here you are. It has claimed you. Are you going to keep going?
Yes.
Are you writing now?
Yes, I'm now working on 2 more books, 2 more novels. So let me see when I can finish them. One is a bit ambitious, so I'm writing it totally in second person. So it's all in you. So it's taking a bit of time, but I hope to finish it this year.
I do have more questions, but I want to bring the audience in soon. And I thought this might be a nice moment to do the actual launch of the book and to unveil Sunandini's absolutely stunning cover. Should we? Yeah. And could we invite Naveen and Sunandini from Seagull Books, which is one of my favorite publishers, to come up on stage and to launch the book with Tathagata? Congratulations on your first but not your last. Thank you so much. And since I've persuaded Naveen Kishore to come up here, Naveen, would you say a few words about what it was like reading General Firebrand and reading Tathagata for the first time? Come and take my chair.
Hang on. I think the correct person to say this would be Sunandini because she was the original reader. Come here. And then I will say something.
It was quite a challenge. I've had the honor and the privilege of editing Tathagata's grandmother in translation and working very closely with her on her texts. I've translated his father's work and worked on translations of his father's work by other people. And so he's the third generation writer that I've worked with in the family, and I was very, very aware sometimes of how oppressive legacy can be and not necessarily an unlocking factor. So when I started to read it, I was very nervous on his behalf. That I am aware that he has the weight of so much on his shoulders. And is he going to be able to have a voice of his own? Is it going to be a confident voice? And is he going to be what they were very effortlessly, which is, is he going to just be a very deft storyteller? And I have to admit that I was absolutely, as you say, blown away. I had to stop editing at certain points because I was just like, what's coming next? Forget the grammar, forget the spelling. I just want to know what's going to happen. And so it is now a hat-trick honor for me to have worked on this book. He was wonderful to work with, very open to suggestions. There was actually very little for me to do because it was more a question of just polishing certain things or fixing a few little things here and there. It's very, very much his book. And it works on, as you say, so many levels. The animals, the people, the past, the present, the future, and occasional hints of the people he carries in his head. So it was very, very exhilarating. I was very pleased and very proud that he had trusted us with the book. And I am looking forward, to what's coming at us next.
And just one little thing. We almost never did this book because the first time I read it and loved it, it was always like so close, the family, that it looked almost like self-publishing to both of us. So I went around getting rejection slips from all our wonderful friends in publishing. And then Sunandini said, why are we even wasting our time? We should just proudly do this damn thing. So we had to persuade him through, we have a mole in his family, Nilanjana. So we worked on them together, and we're really proud to have done this.
I'm so glad to hear that. And don't leave the stage. This is what I call a session capture. Now we're going to throw it open to questions from the audience. You have a natural, a born writer. Despite the weight of legacy, I think there's just something about his voice that is incredibly confident and all his own. And you have two, again, equally, I don't use the word lightly, legendary publishers on stage. What would you like to ask? Please join in. There's a question from the front. Thanks.
This is about, also coming from a personal thing that I'm also the child of an activist, a public figure. And when you were talking about the book, it seems to be also a journey of self-discovery, how we deal with our legacies. Sometimes we may try and go away from them, but in such a scenario as ours, how do we go back to our legacies? How did you reach that conclusion that that you are yourself, but also you are somehow carrying the mantle forward?
I don't know how, it wasn't a conscious process. So, the point about legacy is that, hello, can you, the point about legacy is that, from the outside it looks like a legacy. But once you're part of the family, you actually don't feel like any legacy because you are a normal family. Okay, ultimately he's your father, she's your grandmother, he's your grandfather. So the point is that, to an outsider it might look very different. For us it was not something extraordinary, and they all lived very normal lives. They did not live ostentatious lives, any of them. But yes, after my father passed away, I think there was this conscious thing in my head that now probably it's time. Because till then I was very complacent that, he's writing, so I don't need to write. Till he's around. I think after he passed away, that realization dawned. And it took a bit of time. Actually, it dawned on me after my mother passed away. Since that entire generation was suddenly gone. And like I said, at that point of time, I was very vulnerable. I was very afraid. That's why I said this book is born out of fear and insecurity. And because I didn't deal with grief. I tried to act very cool and I completely messed it up.
I had a question to all of you actually about two things, about language and about experimental fiction, after which we'll take that. So little in the way of experimental fiction or political satire is published in the country. Maybe because there's too much competition from politicians themselves. And the language was just fluently, it was English, but it's an English that is confident in Bangla as well, that carries Bangla through it in a completely natural way. So whoever wants to respond to any part of this, I'd just love to hear your thoughts.
I think it comes from, and our excitement about this novel was, one part of the excitement that I felt personally was that after a very long time, I was reading something by an Indian writer that was not necessarily selling the India that one imagines that the West wants to read, or it didn't follow any of the Indian tropes, that people feel are very popular, or Indian novels should either be about middle-class households or traumas or, city life or any of that. It's actually a world novel. It just happens to be by an Indian writer. It works anywhere and everywhere. And yet the India came in through the language, in the way that, we read of the world, at least, a certain generation, and I think Tathagata and I share that generation, where we were reading literature from everywhere. And it was just given to us as books. Our parents never said necessarily that this is a Russian book, or this is a book from Britain, or this is a book from America, or wherever. You were just reading. It was all in English, and then the English that you then spoke or you then, wrote was inflected by the world, right? And it was, for us, it's very unconscious, and sometimes there's Bengali in it, sometimes there's Hindi, sometimes there's a French word, because Hercule Poirot spoke so much French. It comes from the oddest places, but it's there. And so it's a world book, but in Indian English. And it's a point of pride that we just, the idea of tinkering with it just didn't arise, because that is, who we are, that is how we speak. This is how we've made the language our own, and we wear it very proudly. And it's in that similar spirit that we often tackle the translations that we do from the Indian languages into English. They don't have to be in British English, they don't have to be in American English, they are in Indian English, or an English that reflects the cadences and the peculiarities of the language, from which it has crossed over.
And I think also, even I shouldn't be saying this about my own book, but I think readers will find the English here is very different from even traditional Indian writing in English. And because I deliberately used a certain kind of language, because I didn't want very well-rounded language which will come and generally caress you like a breeze and make you feel very comfortable. I wanted the language to be jagged like a knife so that it hurts you. You read and it hurts. And maybe some of the names and the imagery is quite grotesque by a lot of, standards of Indian writing in English, maybe. But I deliberately used language like that. Because I wanted, and I told, while I don't want it to be polished and rounded, I wanted it to be jagged.
And it works. I'm sorry, I left you waiting. You had a question, and there's one more up.
One side you are saying that this unsystematic development that is going on in this earth, especially in these Himalaya and these other regions. So the survival of the people, those are living over there, that totally dependent on the tourism. And for that, the development is going on. So what do you think? How they will survive without this tourism, or what might be the systematic development over there?
I'll tell you very frankly, they have survived till now on tourism. So, I don't think widening the road will first of all, there were already tourists going there. It's not that, they were alien to tourists. And also, there is a way to develop. There is a way to do certain things. For example, it's not just about the mountains. I'm talking about, this is about today's modern planning. In our cities, when it rains, for 2 hours, the cities get waterlogged. Why? Because the sewage system, the drainage wasn't planned. You have to plan for exigencies. You have to plan for flooding. You have to plan for... You can't have unplanned development. Just you want to do something, you build a 5-star hotel. You, for example, in the mountains are not places where you build 5-6-story buildings. If you go to Nainital town today, you'll see these 6-7-story buildings which are unsustainable. Every 1 or 2 years, one of them fall down. But the thing is that people don't listen. And this can't go on indefinitely. That's all. I'm not saying that people shouldn't have their livelihood or something like that. All I'm saying is that there has to be a due planning.
Yeah. Okay. We are in the last 5 minutes, so would you mind extending that conversation
We'll
later?
talk later,
yeah?
After the session.
And he'll be signing books outside anyway, so you can catch up with him there. Question from the front row and then question from the side here. People at the back, what is up with you?
My question to you is that you being a Bengali, why did you choose English over Bengali to write?
I'll tell you very frankly. Yes, I'm Bengali, and I am quite proficient in Bengali, in written Bengali. But the thing is that I have also plied my trade in English for pretty long. I've worked in English journalism throughout. I've worked with Indian media houses as well as international media houses. So the point is that, and I had moved to Delhi quite some time back, and being away from Calcutta, obviously, you tend to kind of use English more in your daily life because most of your colleagues are non-Bengalis and stuff. So that came very naturally to me, but I'm equally proficient in both the languages. So I'm not ruling out that I won't write in Bengali in future.
Good to know that. We have a question from the front. Anyone else who wants to ask questions, just so that I can see hands?
Hello, sir. Actually, in today's time, everyone is connected with social media, and they have these zones, echo chambers, where they share their own opinion and they like to listen to their own similar opinions. So, as a writer that likes to tell truth to power, it is also important that your voice reaches to other people that don't share your opinion. So, how hard it is to reach them?
I don't know. I mean, like, I've just started writing. This is my first book. So, I mean, like, and I'm not a very savvy social media person. So, that is probably something I'll have to work upon. I mean, like, because all given and said that book is ultimately, it's a cultural commodity. And it needs to sell, because I also need to eat and eat well so that I can write. And the publisher also needs to eat and survive well. So the point is that, I accept that a book is a cultural commodity and it needs to sell. And yes, I don't have an answer for you because I am not a very savvy guy. Yes, I have been in digital media for quite long. I've led verticals and stuff. But I'm personally myself not very... I've done it for the media houses I've worked with, but I've not done it for myself. But maybe I have to start doing it now.
Okay. I have a final question for all three of you, whoever wants to take it. It's a naive one, but I genuinely believe that fiction can change, if not the world, it can change us. You spent so much time in this business. What do you think? You know, I look at books like Tathagata's, and I think it is going to disrupt, you know, as well as entertain everybody it reaches. What do you think?
Yeah, totally, absolutely. I mean, we've for 42 years been disturbing the status quo by our sheer presence. And I'm on record saying that my entire purpose in life is to confuse the enemy, quote unquote. Everybody out there needs to be disturbed, confused, woken up, agitated. And I think literature of any kind, fiction, non-fiction, poetry, drama, cinema, tends to work if it changes the status quo. And especially at the Seagull level, we've done some of that for a long time.
That you have. Tathagata, fiction for you, salvation, redemption, challenge.
All of them. All of them. I mean, this book has definitely been salvation, yeah. And but I think it's a challenge, and because one of the downsides of having read quality literature is that it's not possible to churn out industrial level, I mean, content. Yeah. And you want your content to be serious and to stand out. Because, I mean, I think one thing I have learned from my family and as well as reading books is that if you have been brought up on quality literature and serious literature, even if you can't write yourself, but it will prevent you from writing something entirely frivolous or
yes,
maybe potboil kind of a literature.